Morning, everybody. Today we're joined by Otto de Vries. He's the CEO of IATA, and he's here to talk to us about the possibility of a new airline agent model. Thanks for joining us today, Otto.
Morning, Sarah. Yeah, thanks. It's great to be with you again.
Great. So I think in travel news, we've reported quite a bit about frustrations that have built up in the last few years between the airline and the agent community, and frustrations with the way that IATA's travel agency program is run. Maybe you can just sort of sum that up for our viewers and tell us about some of the larger frustrations.
Sure. So from a background point of view, the agency program as we know it today with BSP settlement has probably been around for about 45 years, maybe 50 years even. In fact, South Africa was the second market in the world to roll out the agency program as we know it. The difference, of course, between them and today is that back then, agents were rewarded through commission to act as an agent on behalf of the airline, who is defined in this regard as a principal. So for every ticket you sold, you got a reward. In fact, back in the day, it was incredibly simplistic in that there was a very clear and set commission that was defined for domestic and international, as well as economy and business class tickets. And that policy applied for all ticket sales to all agents across the world. Since then, business models and the different ways that revenue is generated has evolved accordingly. And like with any other industry, more and more expectation is placed on a fair reward based on a sheer volume of support that is then provided. So whilst the commercial model has evolved and is probably reasonably fit for purpose in terms of today's business environment, what is clearly not evolved is the agency program that is still seen based on the way it was set up 45, 50 years ago, where the principal is the airline and the travel agent is the agent. And so the entire program is based on the premise that anything that the airline says you must do and abide by, otherwise you cannot be an agent to sell that airline's products and services. And so what we've got is a very one-sided program today that is clearly not fit for purpose, no longer matches up the commercial reality between airlines and travel agents. And because the BSP has been such an effective method to remit airline sales, with very few other options to date that have been available, many agents remain committed to being an accredited IATA travel agent, whilst finding it increasingly frustrating in terms of the one-sided nature and the very heavy-handed abuse that is being shone on them as a result of the way that the agency program is established.
I see. Okay. So this year, the effects of the COVID pandemic on the industry have caused a lot of people to sort of relook at things from scratch. And there have been calls within the community for the scrapping of the agency program and even for the scrapping of BSP and ways to work without this program. Do you have any ideas for solutions for industry outside of this that you could share with our viewers?
Sure. So look, this noise around it has obviously been amplified under COVID, not least of which because we noted that immediately we saw a clamping down of refunds through the BSP and through the GDS model, and airlines trying to take back full control of how they distribute their content, but also how they are trying to withhold refunds. Whilst parallel to this, we continue to see an unacceptably high amount of ADMs being issued, often for very, very pedantic or unnecessary or even incorrect reasons, which is increasingly making it look like they're seeing it as a revenue opportunity at the cost of travel agents and their customers. By virtue of refusing to do refunds, it's placed travel agents in a very difficult position with their customers, who are obviously expecting refunds to be processed, and all that we're seeing is vouchers, which have different values, different commitments in terms of how long they are valid for, and how much flexibility sits within those vouchers. When customers just want their money back, they find it increasingly difficult to do so. And as we sit here today, 5-6 months into COVID, I can tell you that there is still millions upon millions of rands owed to travel agents in refunds. I've seen some of the numbers. And globally, it still ramps up to billions and billions. So we are just finding the situation no longer tenable as an industry. And if you look at how all other commercial relationships operate with other suppliers, it's a very simple conditions and terms that are set out, which requires the relationship to function as a business relationship. And a lot of it also includes payments. So I am becoming increasingly of the opinion that what we're going to start seeing is more and more agents, and it might be driven initially by the larger global players, but it's going to come, where they're going to say, Mr. Airline, if you want our business and continued support, it's going to be under these new terms and conditions, which will include different forms of payment, or we are no longer going to support your airline because of the way that you've treated us in the past. Continue to treat us under COVID-19, and it is no longer fair or equitable in terms of relationships from a business perspective. What those payment solutions may look like could vary. It could be as traditional as credit cards and EFT transfers, but we're seeing increasingly a number of payment models entering into the marketplace. And they're becoming increasingly dynamic in the way that they are being established, and is bypassing all existing forms of settlement. They're often very cost effective and are therefore going to become increasingly something that businesses are going to look at, because nobody going forward wants to carry the risks that they have had to carry in the past in order to conduct business. And COVID has totally exposed the high levels of risks that we find ourselves in, not least in which we are often expected to prepay whilst customers are still expecting 30-day credit. So the model has to change because it is not sustainable. It has been heavily exposed under COVID, and the world is changing, and this is the right time for us to rethink what that might look like.
Wow. So do you see things moving forward without a BSP even?
Well, look, there's two schools of thought. Either the BSP is going to have a very sudden and ugly death, or it's going to die a very slow and painful death as businesses start to identify and reconsider the nature of the commercial relationship that they're going to have with airlines going forward. As part of the process on a daily and a weekly basis, my frustration levels is going beyond anything that is normal. We are hearing stories from members, not just locally, but globally, of the most heinous abuse of ADM policies. Efforts on our part to try and deliver a risk management profiling that also identifies the risk that we as agents face working with airlines is going in circles with no clear input or clear ideas from the airlines around what they feel is fair. So in other words, all the risk and the costs related to managing that risk, we are being forced to accommodate their needs and expectations, but everything we present to them is just declined as not workable for their businesses. So we are not moving the process forward in managing airline risk in a manner that is acceptable on the one side. On the other side, we're attempting to increasingly deliver some kind of temporary local financial criteria to better support the agent community within the South African APJC and in other global markets. And we are constantly putting proposals forward to which the airlines are either not responding or rejecting. And in turn, we're not seeing any ideas from them in terms of what they believe is fair or equitable, which means that it shows that they're not genuinely interested in trying to assist us in delivering a fair situation around what is currently turning out to be a perfect storm within the South African APJC, which we highlighted and spoke about in the past. And I'm happy to touch on that again if you want me to.
Oh, that's great. I said thank you for explaining that so clearly to everybody, and we wish you luck with your proposals. Thank you for joining a Travel News webcast again.
Absolute pleasure. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.